Hey, what's up? I'm Ryan. I'm back. Welcome back. Well, welcome back to me and welcome back to you, I guess, or welcome. I wanted to make a video about some of the stuff that's going on in fashion. Hey. Whoa, I know I said I don't like doing these like update videos on fashion. Do you guys like this kind of stuff? I only like it when I can talk in depth and apply the theory and the historical context and stuff. But you know why I'm doing this? You want to really know? Do you really know? You don't. You don't understand me. I'm so misunderstood. I didn't have Wi-Fi on the plane. I just came back from Paris and I did not have Wi-Fi on the plane. So I was like, I have to write about things that just happened. These are like this is the outcome of conversations I was having in Paris. Let's see it that way. With some deeper insight into the gossip in Paris in the fashion industry and different forms of the apparel industry. Like this is what everybody was gossiping and chatting about. And these are some of the things I kept saying over and over in those conversations. Also, we do have an addition to the family. I think it's very clear at this point in the video that sometimes cousins can become sisters. So that's the new addition that we have. This is Aesop body balm, and I'm not ashamed to say that. Also, I had an amazing time in Paris, if anybody wanted to know. It was so much fun, and I'm going to be writing, hopefully for Substack, article for Substack, where I talk about all the cool places I went in Paris so that I can have pictures. Or do you want me to talk about it on video? You let me know. Let's get into the video. Let's go. The first thing I wanted to talk about was just something I came across in an art search, and I'm forcing it into this video. Dauan Jacari from Myth magazine. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Dauan Jacari is like duality junkie on Instagram, like the extremely cool designer artist. Like Dauan Jacari is really popular for the spiral boxer skirt. If you're in New York City, you've definitely seen somebody wear them. Chloe Sevigny has worn it, visionary I would say, and did this really cool runway show that I associated with like dandyism. This is way before the Met Gala theme was announced, and transgressive aesthetics that reconceptualize like black masculinity and black fashion in general, but honor and offer so much reverence to blackness and like black American culture, African American culture. They had those shirts that say African American on the back, which I still want. I just love everything that Dauan Jacari does. Well, Dauan Jacari has this dress in this like Myth editorial styled with Hodakova shoes and like Capezio tights, like, which is so, I don't know, just really cool. I thought it was so sexy, dude. I thought it was so sexy. I've never seen such overt women's wear, I don't think, by Dauan Jacari. Like, this is a dress, but it's cool. And I feel like so much of his work is about interconnections and making something into a larger whole by piecing things together, like conceptually, culturally, aesthetically, and identifying gaps, though, in how they're received and how they're connected. Because when Dauan Jacari did that runway show oriented around like black masculinity and kind of reconstructing it, it's identifying the ways that fashion is limiting as well, because on the runway they have these flamboyant, walks and these really tough and ethereal and, romantic ways of walking that are they're combining so many axes of identity that you don't get to express in fashion traditionally, especially not high fashion, especially not at that level. Like, there were so many editors in that room, like huge major publications. There were Vogue editors in the room and things like that. And, they're not seeing runway shows where people get to express themselves as individuals on the runway. And so it's identifying those gaps while filling them in with this like life and culture. So to see this like woven together with like huge open, like knit looking like dress, it was so interesting. I was so surprised to see this, but it was like very intriguing. It feels very symbolic, very sexy. Very, very sexy. Loved it. And so I just wanted to point out that like something hot happened recently. I don't know how recent that shoot was. Okay, that's what I liked from Dauan Jacari. We're gonna get into the big meat of this video, which is the Jonathan Anderson at Dior moment. Jonathan Anderson just took over Dior men's and women's. We talked about it before. And we were really anticipating the show. Like, a lot of y'all asked me, what do I think about it? A lot of y'all were really excited or, nervous, but I think most people had really good high hopes, like positive expectations, because he's a master at his craft. It's just weird when the Basquiat images released. If you guys didn't know, Dior released these images of Jean-Michel Basquiat on their page, being like, oh, he's the big style inspiration essentially for Jonathan Anderson, and people were like, oh god, please don't let this be, please don't let this be really, really corny. But hey, I don't think it was. So my overall review is, some people hated it, some people He messaged me. I said, how was the show? I was at the bakery. Please, I'm scared to see it. And someone was like, it was a show that could have been an email. And I thought that was funny, but I thought the show was really hot. I thought it was sexy. The sexiness is connected to the culture of earnestness. People felt like the ideas were kind of fragmented, or it looked chaotic, or it wasn't like traditional like Y2K or in the scope of what fashion has looked like recently. But I'm like, yeah, you got to get used to stuff like that. You got to be challenged sometimes, I think, in fashion. And I think what maybe was challenging people, no shade, but I think part of what was challenging people is that it feels more authentic than a lot of like fashion design for the digital age and digital culture. No shade. Hey, let me speak. I'm just joking. You don't have to let me speak. You can completely disagree. You don't have to be rude to me to disagree, but be honest with what you think. Like, you don't have to say that I'm right or that you like the show just because I said I do. I like to hear what other people, I love when I'm like, I love this, and people are like, it sucks, dude. I like that. As long as you're not being like disrespectful, which you don't have to be. I didn't design like, whoa, hey. I felt like the collection felt really spirited and fresh, and I liked the way that they handled the reference to Basquiat's style. It really could have gone another way, guys. I think we know that this could have gone into like pure disaster land. It could have been so corny. I thought it was a good parallel between Jean-Michel starting off as like a street poet who was visually storytelling through like spray painting and graffiti art, and that being kind of co-opted by the high art world once he was able to enter the art world after he had already developed a name for himself independently through his work. I think visual storytelling throughout is a much more comprehensive way of offering reverence to him as a reference than just like putting his work onto a shirt, for example, as like a print, an ornament on top of like dress shirts as a visual component of his design. That would have been so whack. And I was so worried about that. I was like, Jonathan, but he didn't. He would never. He cares too much about me. We know this. Like, I don't know why I was so anxious, because I was like, I know he wouldn't do that, but imagine if he did and then flopped and then like lost his whole career, like gag. Ooh. I think that this was a much more elevated way of translating his style. Like the backwards tie that was like the dior logo on the front, and it's like loosely tied, the way that Basquiat has it in the picture that's referenced, I think. It's like you're rejecting and embracing the art world, which reminds me of my time in Paris. We'll talk about this later. I might need like a private Substack where I can like talk about my life experiences, y'all. I really like the juxtaposition between the tuxedo shirts and the more formal wear, mixed with like these outdoor casual attire, kind of like sporting around the city kind of look. It's just very laid back. I like the dad sandals and the short shorts combo mixed with these like sportier, preppier sweaters and button downs and things like that. More than anything, I see the spirit of this like elite Zen consciousness almost, which I like. I'm like, yeah, put that forward. There's some like subtle signaling about consciousness, like the sustainable shoe reference, sandals, the jelly style sandals, but they're not jelly, like mixed with like the sex of the shirtless open suit jackets and things like that. There's a lot of like freedom and this idea of like coming into yourself as an artist, but you're like still interacting with the art world. It's kind of like, I don't know, it's very popular in the early 2000s. Nicolas Guesquier's Balenciaga 2004 collection that I always say I love reminds me so much of this. And then like the Tivana stores in the mall and that kind of, you know, Starbucks aesthetic in the early 2000s, and everything is like fall leaves. And it's just like, yeah, I'm just like free. I'm just like carefree. But it's like you're only in that position because of your like class status or your association with the elite. But then you're trying to pretend that you're divested from it. But then you're also trying to indulge in it and get the benefits of it. It's like this really weird class play kind of aesthetic that honestly I like, because it tells a really funny, interesting story that's like very realistic and true. Miss Thing. Love the beautiful knit sweaters with the shorts. They remind me of the first time that I saw Jalil Johnson, who is this amazing fashion journalist, so chic and looked so preppy the first time I saw him, and he looked so relaxed and cool. Like, I never at that time used to take photos of people just sitting at runway shows, just like, oh, they're so cool looking, like, and very rarely do I physically, viscerally had to take a photo of Jalil. Like, I was going to have a panic attack if I didn't. I never thought that we would speak or know each other. I was just like, this is the most fabulous, well-dressed person I've ever seen in my life. And then I start talking to people, and they're like, oh, do you know Jalil? Do you know of Jalil? And I was like, no, who is that? And I was like, oh, that is I know that person. They're the most stylish person ever. And everybody was like, yes, Jalil literally is. And this kind of reminded me of like taking inspiration from Jalil. I imagine I'm not saying that they did, but I do imagine a lot of people in fashion take a ton of inspiration from the way that Jalil understands personal style, self-authorship, and storytelling and dressing. Like, it just doesn't really come close. I've never seen anybody understand themselves and be so in touch with themselves and in fashion. And this reminds me of like an ounce of that. That one look reminds me of like an ounce of the first time that I saw Jalil. Nobody can recreate that because it's not something that's, you know, created to be put into production for commercial use. But that essence of finding yourself through style, I think all designers desire to capture that on the runway. And I think looking to Jalil would be a way of trying to understand that essence and trying to turn it into like a commercial venture to the best of your abilities. So I wanted to start off by talking about footwear in terms of the design at the show as well. Diet Coke Beast on TikTok is like this footwear, like brilliant genius. And Diet Coke Beast said that the Dior men's show made some comparable shoes to Nike's considered BB shoe style, and says that they look really similar. And Diet Coke Beast is 100% right. They look identical, and that apparently the considered line at Nike was this sustainable shoe line. And I thought that was really interesting, and I wondered what led them to that, because I think it gives us a ton of insight into the direction that this house is going to go. So Jonathan Anderson brought over the legendary footwear designer Nina Christen, who worked with him before at the House of Loewe to establish some really iconic signature shoes for them. She's also worked at the Rose, Saint Laurent, Bottega, Celine. She's responsible for them. So I thought it was really wise for him to bring her over to Dior and see kind of what products she can put out, because a lot of people undervalue the product teams, like the footwear and accessory designers and, you know, merchandising people and things like that when it comes to what propels these brands. And they always attribute the success of these brands to a creative director, which obviously they get to like lead the direction of and approve some of these things. But I think that the visions of people like this are really critical to remember. In terms of her design sentiment that she's possibly going to bring to Dior, she said, even though she's responsible for like some of the craziest shoes at Loewe, she, for her personal self and her shoe design for her brand, she likes things that are more classic. She doesn't wear crazy clothes herself. This is what she tells Essence, which I love Essence's editorial, like entire like landscape. It's so fab. But she said that she prefers to wear things herself that are more classic, but she doesn't mind the creative compromise that comes from working for a big brand, because she's like, it's not my taste anyway. So if I'm offering a creative idea, and she said she's always like when she has to work for other brands, she's like churning and churning a huge massive amount of creative output. She's like, it's fine if they, you know, compromise in one direction or another, because she's like, I'm not giving up anything because it's not my style regardless, usually. Or sometimes. So she said that she's always in charge of the creative aspect rather than like just the commercial aspect of working on footwear. And she said that's where the most suffering occurs. And I feel like Jonathan Anderson relates to that a lot, to work out some of those designs. She made the puddle boot from fall 2020 at Bottega and the Lido sandal, which were both extremely viral and extremely popular and very often knocked off. She spent 3 years at Phoebe Philo era Celine, which is insane, according to Women's Wear Daily, and that's where she met Daniel Lee, which is what led her to her job at Bottega. If it is like this idea of sustainability or trying to even posture or signal sustainability, that aligns with what I was saying about like the kind of spiritual zen enlightened aspect of the shoe design and how that contributes to the rest of the design that's going to continue at the house. I cannot wait to see how it's translated through women's wear. I think it may be there to symbolize that level of consciousness that artists used to have or have to have, I guess, especially in terms of fashioning identity, especially Basquiat, who was cited. There's a word from this the digi fairy uses, and it's like the point of the term is to acknowledge that they're appropriating the concept, and it's not actually connected to any form of like spirituality or belief system. It's an appropriation of and an amalgamation of different Eastern cultures and also some Western ideologies. And I know that that's a really broad summation, and that's the point. Like, I can't even pinpoint what they're summarizing because they're always like appropriating and meshing everything into one. And so that's what the name of the thing is, but it's like Zen something, I just always forget. So in terms of wardrobing and dressing their wearer, I feel like each element of design could be adapted really beautifully into the wardrobe of a cool, breezy man. I think it's really important for men to see this kind of vision of masculinity, especially right now, historically in very dire times. Sometimes this does come up because people are looking for resolution, and I would rather people look for resolution. Maybe hopefully this time with more access to information, they can actually align with these things properly. But I just need men to see like being a carefree artist with good politics who has like a sense of consciousness is a better life path than being a militantly angry, miserable like person. I really like the idea of these clothes fitting into the wardrobe of somebody who has access to them, and maybe leading them to be a little bit more conscious and thoughtful, especially about art and introducing themselves to those kinds of things. I loved seeing the adaptation of the Dior bar jacket. I thought that was really fab, and it like just immediately opens up the show. I love the romantic cotton candy cloud colored color palette on that denim jacket with the little undershirt. It was so refreshing. As I said before, I think it pierces through that fake deep all black or neutral color palette styling as a way to signal sophistication. Girl, we get it. You're deep. Oh my God, you read. You know, I moved on. I'm past it. I like it. It's like a traveled but disengaged kind of artist in Paris like kind of vibe. I really like it. How's my accent? Not good, I know. I spoke English the literal entire time I was in Paris. It was very embarrassing. I kept wanting to say bonjour, however you say it, like bonjour, but bonjour. I couldn't say it because one time I was in Paris last time and somebody said bonjour and I said bonjour and then they spoke to me in English like, you don't speak French. I was like, how'd you know? Clocked my tea, cleared me. My accent's so terrible. Let's go. Okay, and then in terms of art and reference, before I finished writing, like before I actually saw the show, I wrote this video anticipating it, and I said that Jonathan was a master of synthesizing design and references, like consider his ability to, you know, curate art for his Offer Waterman exhibition, which is where I saw him speak about his work. He references like Florian Kreuer and Lynette Yaramboachi, and before at this time when he was with Loewe and, you know, designing at his own house, he was taking inspiration to design collections using the color palettes from those artworks and some of the depth of meaning and creating these really surrealistic wardrobes on the runway to enchant and challenge the imagination and ability to imagine of his audience, right? At the show, once it actually came out, I said that he did this Delft-inspired skirt, cargo short piece, which I thought was like such a brilliant way of kind of processing and synthesizing that's still that commitment to surrealism and imagination, which was clocked by Vogue and Mario Abad, pulling from the archive, using your own sense of authorship, which is oriented around like surrealism, storytelling, interacting with reality versus fiction, and, you know, things that we're used to seeing versus something completely imaginative. And what I said on Twitter was that Jonathan Anderson has this really good way of balancing like reality dressing, which I spoke about from a theory that I'll put on the screen, reality dressing, and then like this really practical way of dressing towards your practical fantasy. I think someone on Twitter said that it was, you know, recession coded, and like they were joking, but I think what they brought was kind of that sense of realness. In terms of his appointment, Jonathan Anderson, and the business of this, he'll be running both sides of the House of Dior. So this was the Dior men's show, but he will be also showing the women's, and it's a first since Dior himself. Overall, according to the New York Times, the industry did see a slowdown in sales, and so even though they're doing really well at Dior, I think under Maria Grazia Chiuri, I think she tripled their revenue, they still are in a luxury market that's slowing down. Like, nobody want to buy luxury at this point when we're worried about this impending war. His personal style was really complicated because of how he was situated culturally. He's like this post-punk artist, but he loved huge designers like Issey Miyake and Armani, and walked in Comme des Garçons, which is transgressive, but still within the luxury sphere, right? Like Andy Warhol said, and this is the quote that I brought up in the beginning, that artists are supposed to look poor but think rich. This is according to Dazed magazine. Look poor but think rich. You know what I mean? You don't want to look like a yuppie and like you're not down and cool, and you can't inspire these rich people to buy your art because you know something that they don't, and you're more, you know, you want rich people in the arts, they want rich people to be like, you're more spiritually inclined. How do you get there? Oh my gosh. Because when you're rich, the one thing that you can't buy, which is why I said the billionaires are crashing out and they're looking for earnestness in culture, because like we're all looking for earnestness, because you're seeing that when billionaires are crashing out, you can't buy that one thing. It's this one thing that got me tripping, is that sense of self-actualization, knowing yourself, that sense of freedom, and like having something that is not something you can purchase, which is just understanding yourself, being self-assured, etc. Like paying for therapy, massages, spas, buying an island, all the things rich people do, they cannot transcend spiritually without, you know, just getting there. And so they depend on all these like shamans and prophets and, you know, researchers and artists and things like that to help them find the next thing on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because all of their other needs are met. And so you do want to be able to, when you're navigating the art world, because it's a job, you do want to meaningfully express yourself and tell them who you are, but also connect your self-authorship and your dressing to your work sometimes, or disconnect it entirely sometimes. You do have to consider how you're perceived, because if your job is to sell the art, like it's selling yourself. And I think that Jean-Michel Basquiat had a lot to, you know, deal with. I've said that 50 times now. The way that artists' fashion identities online now is even so central to how they're perceived. Like, it depends on how you act on social media, how often you're on there. If you have social media, how seriously you're going to be taken by the art world. And like, you can really ruin the way that you're perceived by being too influencery or normal online, because they don't take you seriously as an artist, and they're like, well, you don't have the next level of transcendence because you depend on like money and like, you know, the natural flesh of the earth and the blah blah blah, and they have already achieved all those things, so they feel like they can't look to you. But when you feel like you don't need validation in these ways, and you can manifest that through how you dress, of course they want to buy into you, and then they want to buy your art because they want to take your spirit and, you know, take your soul and whatever. The art world, girl, I have so much to tell y'all. I have so much to tell y'all about Paris. Like, Jean-Michel Basquiat wore suits, but he still got followed around. He couldn't catch a cab, but he was like an artist, a famous artist at that. And he was seen as like homeless or like looked down upon. But he was still able to balance the suits and his bohemian, like carefree aesthetic as well. I believe this is something that Dazed magazine said. It's like artist realness with a twist. I also said I thought it would be really important for Dior to not lean too closely into Hedi Slimani's work, which Jonathan Anderson has expressed was greatly inspiring to him, and he has expressed a lot of admiration historically about Hedi Slimani. I say Hedi Slimani, but whatever. And he has to inject his own sense of self into the design at Dior, and I think he did really effectively, and I think he kind of secretly like synthesized the Hedi Slimani references in terms of like this really authentic way of dressing real cool people, but it's still like kind of catered to the elite. Not just in a Dior way, but specifically in a Dior Homme by Hedi Slimani way. It's only going to get better. If you see some of the early shows from Loewe that Jonathan Anderson designed, when you can see the arc of his design story, even though he's tethering the same thing, like the ideas of patchworking and things like that, girl, it just eats so bad. It's so good. The last thing we're going to talk about is Demna going to Gucci. I'm going to make a separate video about Glenn Martin's Margiela, but let's talk about Demna going to Gucci. So Demna Vasalia, formerly now known as Demna, is going to be the creative director at the House of Gucci. He used to be the creative director at the House of Balenciaga. Okay, that's the one that was making the giant Lego shoes. The dorky dad shoes. The chip bag wallets for Balenciaga. If you've seen any of that discourse, that's the guy, that's your man. He is succeeding Sabato de Cerno. And before, under Sabato, Gucci established their signature color as like the Ancora red color. Ancora meaning like encore, like do it again, like to repeat something in Italian. Like I'd never thought of that until I actually read the things, and I was like, oh yeah, Ancora, encore. I'd recommend that Gucci does not repeat the same old mistakes. Don't do it. Background on Demna. He has a Master's of Fine Arts from Central St. Martin's, which is one of the most legendary and iconic fashion schools. He previously worked at Louis Vuitton and the House of Margiela. And this is why we can credit him with kind of some of the way that he storytells and reinvents what fashion can be. You know, the House of Margiela is a house that does a lot of work oriented around dressing and how women put together their wardrobes and what it means and how we interact with costuming and inanimacy and the fashion system and women and identity and how clothes are related to that. So I think that a lot of things that he does, he's encouraging people to interrogate all of those things in his work. I just read about his retrospective 101 pieces at the Demna Balenciaga exhibition, capturing a decade of transformation. This is on Coeval magazine. They say what once stirred a debate now appears a body of work with permanence. My opinion there was that his work is always going to stir debate, and it's usually oriented around confusion about how it's situated culturally, or what, you know, the messaging should be, or what it means, and how it reflects some of the cultural shifts, although it remains aesthetically really similar sometimes. Like sometimes people are like, oh, well, what is he culturally commenting on if last season he commented on it and the world is completely different? So yeah, that's kind of his tea. Demna's work, they say, underlines contrast and is about like making statements. even though he explains that he has so much reverence for Cristobal Balenciaga, I believe he said he has a photo of him in his office or on his computer desk or something. He has like a framed photo of him in the studio, something like that. I think that he's reconstructing perspectives on masterful construction. And so the way that Cristobal Balenciaga was like fainting at the idea of ready to wear, I believe, or was that Saint Laurent? Probably both. Compared to couture designing, even though Demna reintroduced couture, I think that his intention was to reintroduce the idea of masterful design and put that through the lens of like streetwear and other forms of, you know, making clothes, like the perfectly tailored t-shirt or the perfectly tailored extra large hoodie that goes down to your like thighs or whatever. And so they say that the work underlines the contrast. I think so too. So that's kind of a little bit of his background. And in terms of the house of Gucci though, Gucci's revenue plunged down 23% in 2024, carrying stock price halved in that time. I believe this is from an MSN article. They said that Demna should be and will be the catalyst for Gucci. My opinion is you can't have a catalyst without creative freedom and a direction forward. So give him the freedom and the opportunity to take the direction forward. I really liked the last collection that kind of linked, they allege, with the House of Gucci, like them designing the shows versus him doing the shows. They're like, oh, it's going to be the connective tissue to get us to his, first collection. I sure hope so. All right, because that was a great collection. A lot of people responded really positively to it. Don't drop the ball. Don't. You need to give them the creative freedom and allow him to pull people for like merchandising and all these other things, and not make clothes that are so driven by data and trying to, fix financial woes. It is so legible. It's so transparent. And it's so uncomfortable to look at. Like, let him do some storytelling. Hey, a lot of brands are not letting it happen. Be the one to do it, right? They also emphasize that they chose Demna because of his ability to connect with, they say, quote, the new generation. In my opinion, let's not always overemphasize the new generation and also the simulacrum of youth culture. The youth knows Gucci. Children and young people and teens and people in their early 20s are so cynical because they're so in the know, because they've grown up with this level of transparency about branding and marketing and access to it. It's the social media manager industrial complex. They don't say ha ha ha. They say, oh, the social media manager needs a raise, because they know that it's a social media manager and not the brand being their friend. And we want to instead, I think, create fantasy and story. I think we need some escapism, some earnest storytelling around escapism right now from these kinds of big fashion houses. I really liked what Gucci was doing with the Gucci Vault and things like that. That needs to be more publicized. I found out about Gucci Vault from working in fashion and reading articles. Young people need to be directly confronted with stuff like that. I want Gucci to have some sexiness and some intensity and some distinction. We are chasing the sun. There are no lights on in my house. I don't use lights in this house. This is the retreat. I don't use the lights at the retreat, so the blue that you're seeing, the tone is the tone of the sky right now, which is really beautiful, but I have bad vision in low light, so we're gonna have to actually, okay, I hope that helped. I want to be done with this. The Gucci makeover after Alessandro Michele under Sabato was more like quiet luxury, minimal aesthetic. That makes brands scared to have a more like sophisticated and elevated route, because they're like, oh, you're marketing to older people and that's not cool, so that's why people aren't buying it. But I don't think that's what it is. To market to older people, it doesn't have to be quiet luxury. Those are not the only two options, like boring or, babyish. There's a ton in between there. I think that Demna's style of design is really contrary and over the top. It should introduce a new life and a new breath into that fashion house. I saw this jelly bag ad, and I don't imagine that was done under Demna's direction, but I did see someone say that it was on Twitter, but I didn't see evidence in the fashion publication. So if anybody knows, let me know. If it was under Demna, I would say that that's surprising. It feels really artificial. Obviously, it's this jelly CGI or AI generated design, and it doesn't really speak to the certainty and distinction and closeness to authenticity that we need, I think, right now to feel resolution in such a chaotic time. I think rather than trying to reflect the internet culture and youth culture, what Gucci can do right now is offer some sexy, overt luxury. I said it before, I want pony hair purses to be in the forefront, and I want the textures and layers of the pony hair to be bam, straight in your face, luxurious, ultra sexy. I want some perversion. I want women on horses. I want Tom Ford era Gucci levels of sexiness and essence of sexiness, but it doesn't have to be so oriented around that kind of poppy, cinematic, sexiness. There's a different way to introduce it, and I think a very deep, sensuality not like this stereotype like marketing agency style of like coolness either, like something authentic. I think that'd be really, really good and righteous for them right now. I want them to keep it up with that bridge that I heard they were doing. So those are my thoughts. My camera's about to die. I hate when people say that, but those are my thoughts on what was going on in fashion. Again, I had to only do this deep dive because I was on a plane in Paris. I'm trying to write an actual theory video if I could please get a moment of peace. But I thank you. And I love you, and I'm so thankful that you stuck around and listened, and I'm so thankful to you guys always. I'm so thankful to all the kind people who come up to me at the club in Paris, which was insane. The club in Brooklyn, on the streets, in the stores, like wherever people come up to me, I appreciate it more than you can understand. It's not possible for me to express my gratitude, so hey, thanks. Yeah, I hope you guys like this. I'm gonna go lay in bed and edit this and try to rewatch Conclave. It's calling me. I'm gonna eat my almonds. I love you. Thank you.